Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa van Dijk, and in today's video I want to show you how olives, which are usually seen as this healthy food that could even be beneficial for your skin, can very quickly turn into the exact opposite. Especially if you are buying them because you think they might help with your breakouts, skin inflammation, irritation, rashes, or even anti-aging. Because the issue with olives is that most of us are not eating them fresh. We are buying them in a jar, in a can, or from a deli counter, and very often they are sitting in a huge amount of salt brine. And even the ones packed in olive oil can still be very salty. So you might think, well, these are in olive oil, so they must be better. But not necessarily, because many olives are already cured with salt before they are packed in oil. So the olive oil makes them look healthier, but the sodium can still be extremely high. And that is what I want to show you in this video. Because with olives, something that looks like a traditional healthy snack can very quickly turn into a sodium bomb. So look at this. This is not some crazy portion of olives. This is the kind of portion someone would actually eat. Because when you see a few olives, you probably do not think, wow, that's a lot. You think, okay, olives are healthy. They have healthy fats, polyphenols, antioxidants, and they are part of the Mediterranean diet. So you add them to your plate, or you eat them as a snack, or you put them next to your eggs, feta, cucumber, tomato, and bread, because it looks like a healthy breakfast. And nutritionally, in the original food, I understand where that idea comes from. But the problem is that most olives you buy are not just olives. They are preserved olives, they are cured olives, they are olives that have been sitting in salt. So it is almost like taking a food that could be healthy and then pouring a salt shaker over it. And then we still talk about it as if it's the same food, because 10 regular brined olives can already be around 700 milligrams of sodium depending on the brand and the portion. And that is not even a whole meal, that is just a small snack. So if your skin is already puffy, inflamed, irritated, reactive, or breaking out, this is not doing your skin any favors. High sodium is simply not skin friendly. And honestly, I think this is one of the most overlooked factors behind these kind of skin issues in the first place. But that is also why I do not want to make it sound like olives themselves are the problem, because they are not. The problem is simply the huge amount of salt they often come with. And if we then look at the same idea but with a reduced sodium version, it becomes a completely different picture. It is still olives, but the sodium amount is completely different. So instead of getting around 700 milligrams from a small bowl, you might be closer to around 175 milligrams. And this is why I would not judge olives just by the word olives, but I would judge them by the label. Because regular brined olives and reduced sodium olives are not the same thing anymore. One can be a small snack that already gives you a huge sodium load, while the other is still not sodium free, but it is clearly a much better direction. And this becomes even more obvious when you add olives into a full breakfast, because this is the kind of plate that looks very healthy. You have eggs, cucumber, tomato, feta, pita, and olives. It looks fresh, it looks Mediterranean, and it looks like something that should be good for your skin. But if the olives are regular brined olives, and then you also have feta and bread or pita with it, the sodium can climb extremely fast. A plate like this can already be around 1,500 milligrams of sodium, depending on the brands and portions. And just to put that into perspective, that is already close to the ideal daily sodium limit for most adults. And that is before lunch, before dinner, and before any sauce, seasoning, packaged food, restaurant food, or snack later in the day. So you can get a huge amount of sodium right at breakfast from a plate that looks healthy. And that is the part I want you to see. The cucumber is not the problem. The tomatoes are not the problem. The eggs are not the problem. The issue is the salty parts of the plate can dominate the whole meal. And with olives, that usually comes from the brine. Now, if you switch the olives to a lower sodium version, the same breakfast idea becomes much less extreme. It is still not a low sodium meal because feta and bread can still add sodium too, but the direction is already much better. And that is the point. You do not always have to throw away the entire meal. You just have to understand which part is pushing sodium up so much. So if you want to eat olives and you're thinking about your skin, do not just look at the front of the jar. Turn it around and check the sodium, because the serving size can be tiny and the sodium can still be very high. And if you can find reduced sodium olives, that is usually the version I would choose. If you cannot find them, I would honestly rather skip them and choose something else, because there's no point replacing one salty food with another food that has the exact same problem. So whatever you choose instead, I would still quickly check the sodium, because the whole point is to stop accidentally adding huge amounts of salt through foods that look healthy. And from my experience over the years, more often than not, it is not the food itself that is the problem. It is what has been done to it. And with olives, what has usually been done to them is salt. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!